The concept of a king is often a romanticized delusion, but in the late Cretaceous of North America, it was a biological sentence of isolation and violence. Forget the cinematic monster that roars at the sky. The real Tyrannosaurus rex was a masterpiece of evolution designed for one purpose: the efficient liquidation of massive biological assets. At 8 tons, every step this animal took was a calculated expenditure of metabolic energy, a constant gamble against starvation in an ecosystem where even a minor injury meant a slow, agonizing death. We begin not with a hunt, but with the silence of a predator that knows it is being watched by its own expiration date. The Tyrannosaurus did not just dominate its environment. It was tracked by its own specialized lethality. Its skull, a reinforced cage of bone, could withstand crushing forces exceeding 6 tons per square inch, yet its brain was wired for surgical precision, prioritizing the olfactory bulbs to track a scent from miles away through dense humid air. This is the anatomical reality of the world's most famous carnivore, stripped of the Hollywood glamour and viewed through the lens of cold, hard survival. To understand the Tyrannosaurus, you must first understand the physics of its strike. Unlike the slashing wounds of Allosaurus, the Rex utilized a puncture-pull tactic. It didn't just bite, it erased the structural integrity of its prey. When those 60 serrated teeth sank into the flank of a Triceratops, they didn't just tear flesh. They shattered vertebrae and collapsed arterial systems instantly, but such power comes at a cost. The thermal regulation required to keep a warm-blooded multi-ton killer active necessitated a staggering caloric intake. A Tyrannosaurus was a slave to its stomach, a biological machine that had to kill frequently or face systemic organ failure. This pressure created a landscape of absolute terror where every living thing was either a target or a competitor. We often look at the small arms of the Rex as a vestigial joke, but biomechanical analysis suggests they were anchored by massive chest muscles, capable of holding struggling prey in place while the jaws performed the execution. There was no room for error. A single kick from an Edmontosaurus could break a rib, and in the wild, a broken rib leads to an infection, and an infection leads to the end of a dynasty. The psychological weight of such an existence is rarely discussed, yet the fossil record shows us healed bite marks on the skulls of specimens like Sid and Stan, proving that the greatest threat to a T-Rex was another T-Rex. They lived in a state of perpetual civil war, fighting for territory, mates, and the right to exist in an increasingly crowded evolutionary niche. This was not a world of mindless lizards, it was a sophisticated arms race where armor plating met the ultimate armor-piercing weapon. The sensory world of the Rex was a vivid map of chemical signals and low-frequency vibrations. Its vision was binocular, surpassing that of a modern hawk, allowing it to perceive depth and movement with terrifying clarity. It could see you before you knew it existed, and it could hear the infrasonic thrum of your heartbeat from across a valley. This is the documentary truth of a creature that has been reduced to a caricature. It was a sentient fortress, a product of millions of years of predatory refinement, operating at the absolute limit of what biology allows for a terrestrial carnivore. The atmosphere of the Hell Creek Formation was thick with the scent of pine, rotting vegetation, and the iron tang of blood, a setting where the Tyrannosaurus acted as the ultimate regulator. Without this apex pressure, the herbivore populations would have stripped the land bare, leading to a total ecological collapse. The king was a necessary evil. If you are finding this deep dive into the brutal reality of prehistory compelling, ensure you are subscribed to the channel and have liked this video. Your engagement allows us to continue deconstructing the myths of the ancient world with the scientific rigor they deserve. Now, we must look closer at the growth cycles of these titans. A juvenile T-Rex was a completely different animal, a sleek, feathered pursuit predator that filled an entirely different ecological role than its parents. This ontogenetic niche shifting meant that the Tyrannosaurus family didn't just hold the top spot. They occupied the entire predatory spectrum. A teenager Rex was built for speed, with long tibias and a lightweight frame, capable of outrunning the fastest ornithomimids. As they aged, their physiology underwent a radical transformation. Their bones thickened, their snouts deepened, and their speed was traded for pure, unadulterated crushing power. This transition from a scalpel to a sledgehammer is unique in the fossil record. It meant that a single species could dominate an entire continent by diversifying its own life stages. Imagine the pressure on the environment when every stage of a predator's life is optimized to kill a different type of prey. There was no escape. From the moment of hatching to the final, heavy breath of an old patriarch, the life of a Tyrannosaurus was a marathon of violence. We see evidence of gout in their joints, indicating a diet so rich in red meat that it literally poisoned their bones. They were victims of their own success, living fast and dying young, with very few individuals ever reaching their full potential age of 30. Most perished in their teens, victims of the very world they were born to rule. The landscape was a minefield of volcanic activity and shifting river deltas, a prehistoric stage where the Rex played the lead role in a tragedy that lasted millions of years. Every fossil we find is a snapshot of a struggle, a frozen moment of a creature that refused to back down even when its own body began to fail. The sheer scale of their rib cages suggests a massive lung capacity, allowing for sustained bursts of activity that would leave any modern mammal exhausted. They were not sluggish or cold-blooded in the traditional sense. They were high-energy, high-maintenance engines of destruction. As we move deeper into the specific mechanics of their social structures, we find that the lone wolf narrative might be another fabrication. Evidence of group tracking and communal feeding sites suggests a level of tactical cooperation that makes the Tyrannosaurus even more formidable. A pack of Rexes of varying ages would be an inescapable nightmare, a multi-layered trap where the young flush the prey into the waiting jaws of the adults. This is the nightmare that the Cretaceous period perfected. The strategic cooperation of a Tyrannosaurus pack transformed the Cretaceous landscape into a calculated killing field, but the true horror of their existence lay in the inevitable confrontation with their primary caloric source, the ceratopsians. The struggle between a Tyrannosaurus and a Triceratops was not a cinematic dance. It was a collision of biological engineering. A Triceratops was a 3-ton tank of muscle and keratin, equipped with 3 horns that could disembowel a predator with a single upward thrust. To engage such a target, the Rex could not rely on brute force alone. It had to utilize its superior intelligence and sensory processing. This was a chess match played with bone and blood. Every scar found on the frill of a Triceratops tells a story of a failed ambush or a narrow escape. The Tyrannosaurus would often target the neck, seeking to bypass the defensive shield of the frill to sever the spinal cord. However, the sheer physical resistance of these herbivores forced the Rex to evolve specialized neck musculature, capable of absorbing the massive shocks of a countercharge. This was an evolutionary arms race where every defensive upgrade was met with a more devastating offensive capability. But even beyond the hunt, the environmental pressures were suffocating. The air of the late Cretaceous was rich in oxygen, fueling the high-octane metabolism of these massive theropods, but the climate was a volatile mix of humid heat and seasonal instability. In this world, the Tyrannosaurus was also a scavenger. There is no shame in the biology of scavenging. It is a vital energy-saving strategy. With olfactory bulbs the size of a human forearm, a Rex could detect a rotting carcass from over 10 kilometers away. This sense of smell was so acute that it likely dictated the animal's entire migratory pattern. It followed the scent of death across floodplains, often arriving to find smaller predators already on the scene. The arrival of an adult Rex was a signal for every other carnivore to vanish. The presence of a Rex redefined the hierarchy of an entire region. Dromaeosaurids and smaller tyrannosaurids like Nanotyrannus, regardless of their taxonomic validity, lived in the shadow of this titan, surviving on the scraps left behind by the king's brutal efficiency. The sheer volume of meat a Tyrannosaurus consumed meant that its waste products were an ecosystem in themselves, providing nutrients for a vast array of insects and microorganisms. The cycle of life in the Hell Creek Formation was anchored by the success of its apex predator. However, the most chilling aspect of Tyrannosaurus biology is its auditory range. While humans hear in a mid to high frequency spectrum, the Rex was a master of the low frequency world. It produced infrasonic rumbles that were felt rather than heard, a deep, rhythmic vibration that could travel through the ground for miles. This was its primary means of long-distance communication, a way to signal territory or call for a mate without alerting prey to its immediate location. Imagine standing in a silent forest and suddenly feeling your bones vibrate with a sound you cannot hear. This was the calling card of a monster that was very much real. If this level of detailed prehistoric analysis is providing you with new insights into the ancient world, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel, as your support is what allows us to produce this high-fidelity documentary content. Moving forward, we must examine the pathological evidence found in the fossil record. Many T-Rex specimens show signs of a parasitic infection similar to Trichomonas gallinae, which affects modern birds. This parasite caused massive lesions in the jawbones, making it difficult for the animal to swallow. In some cases, the infection was so severe that the predator likely died of starvation, unable to utilize the very weapons that made it famous. This reveals a profound vulnerability. The most powerful animal on the planet could be brought down by a microscopic organism. It humanizes the monster, showing us that even the Tyrannosaurus was subject to the cruel whims of biology and disease. The life of a rex was a constant battle on two fronts. The external war against its prey and the internal war against infection and senescence. Their bones also reveal signs of frequent fractures, many of which healed, suggesting a remarkable resilience and an ability to survive injuries that would be fatal to most animals. This toughness was a requirement for an animal that lived in a state of perpetual high-impact conflict. When we reconstruct the face of a Tyrannosaurus, we must move away from the shrink-wrapped, scaly look of early cinema. Modern science suggests a more nuanced appearance, likely featuring extraoral tissues or lips to protect the enamel of those massive teeth, and perhaps sparse patches of sensory feathers or filaments. This was an animal that looked like nothing we have on Earth today, a hybrid of bird-like precision and reptilian endurance. Its gait was not a clumsy stomp, but a balanced, efficient stride, with its massive tail acting as a counterweight to its heavy head. At a walking speed of about 5 miles per hour, it could cover vast distances without exhausting its reserves, making it a relentless tracker. When it did choose to sprint, it was not for long, but those few seconds of acceleration were the most terrifying moments in the history of life on land. The physics of an 8-ton animal moving at 15 to 20 miles per hour creates a kinetic energy that no bone or muscle can withstand upon impact. The Tyrannosaurus was a biological projectile. As the sun set over the Cretaceous horizon, the shadows of these giants stretched across a world that was nearing its end. They were the final, most perfect expression of dinosaurian evolution, a climax of predatory design that was only halted by a cosmic accident. Without the asteroid, who knows how much further this lineage could have gone. But for the time they were here, they were the undisputed masters of the terrestrial realm, operating with a directness and a structural integrity that we are only now beginning to truly comprehend through the cold, hard data of the fossil record. The finality of the Tyrannosaurus rex was not a slow decline, but a sudden, violent interruption of a biological masterpiece. To witness the end of this species is to witness the collapse of an entire planetary system. We have analyzed its bite, its senses, and its social warfare, but the ultimate metric of its success was its absolute dominance up until the very second the sky fell. The fossil record in the Hell Creek Formation shows no sign of a predator in retreat. The Rex was at the peak of its evolutionary power when the Chicxulub impactor struck the Yucatan Peninsula. This cosmic event transformed the ultimate predator into a relic in a matter of days. The immediate thermal pulse ignited forests across North America, but for a multi-ton endotherm like the Tyrannosaurus, the true nightmare began in the weeks that followed. The dust and soot choked the atmosphere, plunging the world into a nuclear winter that halted photosynthesis. The massive herbivore populations, the fuel for the Rex's high metabolic engine, vanished. The king of the Cretaceous was suddenly a god of a dead world, a specialized killing machine with nothing left to kill. This is the tragic irony of apex specialization. The more perfect you are for one environment, the more vulnerable you become when that environment changes. We see the desperate final days of the species reflected in the scattered remains of the latest Cretaceous strata. These were animals that died not from combat, but from systemic starvation. An 8-ton body requires a constant stream of energy that a dying world simply could not provide. Yet, the legacy of the Tyrannosaurus did not end in the ash. It redefined our understanding of what life is capable of achieving under the pressures of natural selection. It pushed the boundaries of vertebrate physiology to the absolute limit. Every time we analyze a fragment of Tyrannosaur bone, we find a story of resilience, growth, and terrifying efficiency. The chemistry of their fossils even hints at the presence of soft tissues and proteins that survived tens of millions of years, bridges across time that allow us to touch the biology of a lost world. This is why the Tyrannosaurus remains the focal point of our prehistoric fascination. It represents the pinnacle of terrestrial power. It was the last and greatest of the Carcharodontosaur and Tyrannosaurid lineages to hold the world in its grip. When we look at the birds of today, we see the distant, diminished echoes of this predatory grandeur, but the Rex was a unique experiment that will never be repeated. The physics of our current oxygen levels and climate would not even support such a creature today. It was a product of its time, a titan born of a world that was hotter, more violent, and more vibrant than our own. If this deep investigation into the life and death of the most formidable carnivore in history has resonated with you, ensure you are subscribed and have liked the video. Your support is the foundation that allows us to continue these cinematic explorations of our planet's brutal and beautiful past. As the dust settled 66 million years ago, the silence that followed the Tyrannosaurus was absolute. The forests were gone, the oceans were acidifying, and the reign of the dinosaurs was over. But in that silence, the blueprints for the modern world were being drawn. The niche left behind by the Rex would eventually be filled by mammals, leading a long, winding path to our own existence. We are only here because the king fell. To study the Tyrannosaurus is to study the fragility of power and the relentless forward motion of time. It is a reminder that no matter how optimized, how strong, or how intelligent a species becomes, it is always a tenant of the earth, never the owner. The bones of the Rex, standing in museum halls under artificial lights, are more than just displays. They are monuments to a lost era of biological ambition. They command respect not just for their size, but for the sheer engineering perfection they represent. We have decoded its stride, mapped its brain, and simulated its bite. But the essence of the Tyrannosaurus remains elusive, a ghost of the deep past that continues to haunt our scientific imagination. It was the ultimate expression of life's will to dominate, a creature that lived with a directness and intensity that we can only dream of. As we close this chapter on the Valley of Titans, we are left with the image of a predator that was neither a monster nor a myth, but a living, breathing reality of a world that once was. The Tyrannosaurus Rex was the final word in a 165-million-year-old story, a story of giants that walked the earth with a confidence that seemed eternal. Today, we walk in their footprints, peering through the glass of time at a legacy written in stone and marrow. The reign of the Tyrant King is over, but its shadow will forever loom over our understanding of the natural world. This is the conclusion of the most successful predatory dynasty in the history of our planet, a testament to the power of evolution and the ultimate authority of extinction.